at this point, Effenus Henderson, who's out of Seattle, Washington, but regularly other places. I'm not sure exactly where Effenus is today, but Effenus, we have you here. Oh, great. I know it's very early there, but as I understand it, you're up early in the morning anyway, right?
Oh, absolutely. Oops. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I don't want to interrupt. This will be a standalone keynote. If you all have been following Effenus on LinkedIn or Medium, you're probably seeing a lot of his essays with regards to inclusion and some of the pushback on inclusion. I don't want to soak up too much space here. I just wanted to pop in early and say hello to everybody. I'll speak later at 11 Eastern time. But Effenus, thank you for being here. We're really excited to hear where you want to go. Again, I don't have any idea actually, folks, where he's gonna go. So we're all anxious to hear and learn something new from Effenus Henderson today. The floor is yours.
Well, thanks everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here, working with such an esteemed team of folks who are really committed and passionate about this work. Yet we also know that there is a group of people, particularly some extremely conservative folks, who are pushing back on this work. And so my focus today really will be to share more about what's going on relative to that, so that you have a pretty good context of how we have to navigate the work that we do and how standards can help inform and guide the work we do, because the ultimate objective is to create more sustainable organizations that are really committed to providing an inclusive environment and a diverse workforce for the constituents and stakeholders. I do have a presentation. I'm going to go through that. I generally like to do that. And I have a short, about a 1-minute video, if you'll bear with me. Hopefully it will work. It is something that my son and I produced to sort of set the stage for the work just recently. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to get going here. So just to make sure, can everyone see my slides? Okay, great. So now I need to put it in full presentation mode here. So let's see here. There we go. So the real question is, as we work with the standards work, and you'll see throughout this presentation how standards and how the work of this group is doing, how it helps to reshape and to reimagine a better future that's more inclusive. But we have to do that in a context where there's growing resistance and opposition to DEI. And so I know you've spent a lot of time studying the standard for those of you who have completed the course and for those who are interested in learning more about it. So my focus today is to really share more about what's going on more broadly. And it's primarily focused here in the US, but I think it has applications globally as well. I'm going to start with this video, and please tell me if you can hear it or not. So shout if you can't.
United, we all stand.
We can hear it.
In a world that thrives on its diversity, our greatest strength lies in our unity. But beneath the surface, a small yet vocal group, fueled by extreme ideologies, seek to disrupt this harmony. They prey on our fear, painting a distorted picture of our efforts towards diversity, equity, and inclusion. They fear losing grip on power and control, pushing a long-term strategy to turn back the clock on our journey towards an inclusive democracy. They play a dangerous game with our judicial system, hoping to overturn Title VI and Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. And they've notched some victories, particularly in college admissions. But we refuse to be divided. We stand as a community, embracing our differences. We must stand up together, united in our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Let us unite to counter this divisive moment, protect our values, and build a brighter America. Together, we declare that America is a place for all, not just the chosen few with power and money. Let us remember that united we stand, and together we can shape a future where every voice is heard, every culture celebrated, every person, regardless of race, religion, or background, has an equal opportunity to thrive.
So I just wanted to start that out just to sort of set the tone for my comments this morning and to talk about the real importance of the work that you're doing in DEI in a variety of communities, in a variety of spaces and so forth. But there is, and I've studied this over the last year or so, this changing landscape due to these challenges, both politically, policy-wise, and given the societal shifts that we're seeing. So our role, and the reason why we're very concerned that we have a standard and a way to approach this work is that you have to be grounded in facts and data and information, because what we're trying to do is to, one, protect the progress and the inclusion of marginalized communities and so forth, because through these efforts, we're seeing much more threats to progress, threats to the approaches, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. And so part of this is upholding the values to not be bullied by these tactics, but to uphold our practices with respect to DEI and to really help to shape a resilient community. Because as we heard in the video, it's through being united and by collaborating and sharing practices with each other that we can be more successful. So my objectives here in this presentation is really to help you understand the challenges, to analyze the resistance. I'll talk more specifically about those challenges, to help shape and strengthen our strategies, and to really enhance and encourage us to collaborate more and to share what you're hearing, what you're learning, because it's a collective, it's a holistic approach to the work, not only here in the US, but across the world. So what are the current challenges? I'll address two things: backlash and the impact of those challenges. There are three, basically. This rising resistance, we're seeing it particularly from an extremely conservative, small segment of society, but they're amplifying their messaging and misinformation across a variety of forums, from the internet to social media, to public forums and so forth. And they're attacking it on the political, the policy, and societal levels and so forth. And so this is a threat to the work that we do and to the hard-earned advancements in work of things like the ISO standard and other standards and guidelines like the Global Diversity and Inclusion benchmarks. And so what we're seeing is much more polarization in terms of discourse. Those that are saying, why are we doing this? Aren't we over this? And it got exacerbated, and the pushback got accelerated with the U.S. Supreme Court decision regarding college admissions and so forth. So there are things that they're taking and trying to persuade others that in the private sector and in the non-government sector, there are other things that should be addressed. The impact of all of this is, one, people are getting a bit more fearful about speaking out and talking about DEI efforts because they see themselves as risks. These challenges, some don't feel prepared to address those. And so what the effort here is focused on is undermining things like equity, challenging approaches to addressing systemic disparities, the psychological toll, and we're actually seeing a reduction in some cases of people in DEI roles in private industry and government. In fact, in some states in the US, they're actually legislating regulations to eliminate diversity offices and diversity positions and so forth. So all of these things are happening as we continue to push forward with DEI efforts. And so this is creating a divide and some challenges with respect to progress. So here, what I want to talk about very quickly is the center of the controversy. Two things, and again, this is why the standard is extremely important, and the work to have factual, evidence-based information about disparities, about discrimination, and so forth. But I'll also talk about how this is being intersected with, or the intersection of politics and policies and laws and so forth. So just take a moment and look at this from the data and information standpoint. The first one really is about the skepticism about representativeness of data and information. And so without good, solid, evidence-based information that you can use to support your position, there's more challenges to the work. And so the skepticism grows if you don't have well-defined ways of gathering, reporting, sharing data on statistics, trends, and so forth. They're also using this debating process of, well, perhaps there's another explanation for why there's a disparity that is not solely based on things like systemic bias or other factors. And they're jumping into this, what I call the interpretation of causation, whether or not they're directly based on discrimination or influenced by more broader-based societal factors. And they challenge, in some cases, we're seeing a challenge to historical data. If you look at what's going on in Florida, for example, they're trying to eliminate information and education around the history of discrimination. They're banning books and so forth by very well-known authors of color and so forth. And so they're presenting different worldviews about all of these things, particularly around the impact of systemic inequities and so forth. They're basically much more short-term focused and really aren't really looking at longer-term issues and how the U.S. has and other places around the world have evolved. So this intersection of politics, policies, and laws, this ideological basis, they're trying to frame DEI as this radical left, politically based agenda. There's disagreement on the types of public policies that should be used to address inequities, as you saw with the Supreme Court decision. They're looking at issues like meritocracy versus affirmative action, and whether diversity-based policies undermine merit-based systems. And they're challenging even the role of government, in terms of why should government intervene in some of these areas and so forth. And they're looking at how organizations are taking proactive measures and challenging those as actually reverse discrimination or zero-sum games where someone is losing. And so there's a clash between some of the proactive measures that are focused on emphasizing equal opportunity under the law and so forth. So I want to zone in here for a moment about the fact that I've been studying over the last 6 months ago, this major corporate initiative strategy where a couple of organizations are actually attacking diversity and inclusion programs in private industry. And I have actually pulled the data, including the actual letters that were sent to CEOs of these corporations, as well as the EEOC in the US, the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission. And I want to look at what they're challenging and what the opposition is. And also, this seems to be part of a larger pattern. This person here, Christopher Rufo, is from the Seattle area, and he's been someone who's been advising folks like Ron DeSantis in Florida, but he's sharing and trying to create misinformation and disinformation about diversity, about inclusion, and so forth, and trying to categorize it in a variety of ways to try and sway opinion about DEI. I've written a document. I haven't shared it publicly yet, but these are a group of companies that have been challenged by this organization, America First Legal, and in some cases, Ed Bloom. Ed Bloom was one of the architects of the decision with the Supreme Court regarding college admissions and so forth. But I want you to understand, what are they doing and why are they going after progressive companies like this list here? What is about their programs, their practices, their strategies, their commitments that is being challenged? So let me just talk briefly about that in the interest of time. These are 3 examples that I pull from the data. First of all, things like inclusive hiring programs. In this example, a company A implemented a program to increase diversity in hiring through targeted outreach and training. They're criticizing and challenging some of those initiatives rather than, well, if you read that, critics argue that this initiative favors candidates based on demographics rather than skills. So they're saying is, why should you use race or gender or sexual orientation, those things, as the basis for your outreach strategies and so forth, even though the companies are doing that because they have pronounced, what I'd call pronounced underrepresentation in certain categories. And these efforts are to complement and supplement a broader progressive strategy around hiring. Issue around pay equity. Company B conducted a comprehensive analysis to identify and rectify gender and racial pay gaps. The opposition contend that some pay disparities are based on individual choices and qualifications, and they view these interventions as unnecessary government intrusion. And you'll find that in some of the way they're attacking specific companies and specific practices and so forth. And that's why the data, again, that we have to share those discrepancies through the tool like the ISO standard is very important. Third one, around even diversity training programs. One company introduced a mandatory diversity training program to foster a more inclusive culture, this sense of belonging, this inclusivity. They argue that such programs are divisive. They impose particular viewpoints. In fact, I've heard the comment that they're indoctrination. So if you think about how they're coming after some of these progressive efforts, you could kind of get a sense of the way that they're attacking those programs. 5 areas or 6 areas, 7 areas here. This perceived reverse discrimination, that they discriminatory against majority groups, looking at things like reverse discrimination. This meritocracy concerns around lowering the quality, perceived lowering the quality of the candidates. This fear of tokenism. They express concerns that some initiatives might lead to tokenism, where individuals are chosen based on demographics rather than qualifications. This economic and efficiency argument, that you're diverting resources. You see that in some of the work of Christopher Rufo, away from core business activities, impacting efficiency and financial performance. Even things like political ideology, this lack of tangible results. They demand clear evidence that DEI initiatives lead to significant positive outcomes. And again, that's why I want to reemphasize the work that's being done by Inclusion Score to really provide tools to have clear evidence, trend data, and information that helps to support what you're trying to do, focused on helping that business to be more sustainable and to achieve longer term goals, and to show the evidence of how that how diversity, equity, and inclusion leads to that. And many of you have read the McKinsey report, so you have a sense of that. And this fear of reprisal, some fear backlash or professional consequences for expressing different points of view or criticisms or so forth if they provide a view that pushes back on DEI. So some of these are some of the reasons that I found throughout that data. I just wanted to share very quickly that data and so forth. There's also this misinformation and white grievance, this role of misinformation I'll talk about, and then the stoking of white grievance as a strategy in which they're employing to create a reluctance to weigh into DEI efforts and programs. Not in the interest of time, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, but so what they're doing is they're disseminating false narratives. They're spreading inaccurate information about DEI initiatives. That's why you have to be very on point with the information and data you have. In some cases, they're manipulating facts. They're twisting statistical data or statements out of context. They're looking at corporate diversity statements. They're looking at the information that's being displayed on corporate websites. And they're actually challenging what I'd characterize as aspirational goals as quotas, which they really aren't. They're good faith efforts to expand and broaden the diversity of the workforce. And they're mischaracterizing diversity programs, in some cases calling them unfair, divisive, and a form of indoctrination. And so this process is helping to undermine trust and skepticism among leaders and employees about the effectiveness of DEI efforts. And they believe somehow that this misinformation is really focused on hindering what I'd characterize as constructive dialogue and collaboration, making it challenging to actually address real equity issues. So what do we do to counter this misinformation in terms of DEI? Well, really stay focused on facts and information, be very transparent, present accurate information backed by credible sources to debunk these false narratives, because you will get these challenges to the work that you do. Continue offering educational initiatives such as what we're doing today to help employees and stakeholders distinguish between accurate and misinformation, and to create spaces such as this for open discussions that allow for questions and concerns to be addressed directly, that helps to foster understanding and so forth. The stoking of white grievance, I think, is another one of the tactics that's being employed. They're appealing to identity, this fear that white identity is under attack, this cultural anxiety with the browning of America, for example, these cultural shifts, or in some cases being perceived as eroding, quote, traditional values. There was an article just last night about Target's use of a wide array of ornaments on a Christmas tree featuring a Black Santa in a wheelchair, as an example. These things that they are suggesting are eroding traditional values. This victim narrative, they are being perceived as victims of reverse discrimination, even in the absence of evidence. And they're using it to fuel these tensions to create further polarization about DEI efforts and so forth, which is all distracting from systemic issues, directing attention from systemic equities that by focusing on these grievances and so forth. So what do we do? You have to be empathetic and listen, to engage in conversations, try and understand these fears and concerns, to highlight these shared goals that are important for organizations, to really stick to the business case, the higher purpose that organizations have in serving society and their stakeholders, and to use data and insights from that data to share the benefits of and the positive benefits of diversity and inclusion. So this addressing misinformation and white grievance requires collaboration. You just can't do it in a silo or in one company. It requires us to be talking about these issues across organizations and industries and across stakeholder groups to build a more informed and inclusive society. You can't sit by and be silent on these issues. You do have to speak up. It is a collective responsibility. So just some quick ideas around strategies for responding to resistance. Two things: effective engagement strategies and maintaining the DEI integrity. Empathetic listening, clear communications, using stories to highlight the positive impact of DEI efforts, and to create some humanization of the goals by connecting them to real people, open dialogue, and collaboration and engagement. And I've said that already. In terms of maintaining DEI integrity, I've got a few things. First and foremost, have a data-driven approach based decision on quantitative and qualitative data, continuously measure and analyze the impact of your programs, have an inclusive approach to decision-making, be consistent and transparent in terms of your communications and any adjustments or changes that you're making. Have ongoing education that addresses any of these misperceptions and biases, and really work to equip your employees with tools to recognize and counter this misinformation. Stay focused on who you are as a business or an organization, so align with your core values, and demonstrate a link between DEI and overall success of the organization. Be clear on who's accountable, outline the consequences for behavior that undermines inclusion. Take a long-term approach, that this is part of our longer-term commitment, using a framework for change, and be adaptable, be flexible as the organization or business changes and so forth. So very quickly, some implications and moving forward in terms of adapting your DEI efforts and collaboration. One, this requires continuous assessment. You've got to regularly evaluate the effectiveness of DEI initiatives in light of the opposition and adapt as needed. So don't just continue doing what you've always done, because they're being relentless in some of these attacks. Customize your approaches. Really, there's no one size fits all approach. Tie them specifically to your organization, your mission, your vision, your values, your strategic priorities, and have these resilient strategies that can withstand opposition. And you're going to have to equip your leaders with more information about the business case and the organizational imperative for DEI. In terms of collaboration within the community, share knowledge, best practices, insights, lessons learned with other DEI professionals. Collaborate on joint initiatives to demonstrate a united front. Amplify our voices in terms of advocacy for DEI values in order to counter this resistance, and build a support network such as this group here is an excellent example of a way to do that. In conclusion, it's evident that navigating resistance and opposition to DEI efforts is a crucial aspect of our journey toward a more equitable and inclusive future. The challenges we face underscore the significance of our work and the need for strategic, informed responses. So as we move forward, it's important to keep in mind the following key takeaways and utilize the available resources for further learning and action. One, key takeaways: understand the landscape. Recognize that there is this environment where people are challenging our work politically, from a policy sense, and through misinformation. Use data-driven responses, counter misinformation with data, transparent communications, emphasizing the genuine impact of DEI initiatives. Be empathetic, in terms of lean into some of the concerns, listen to them, engage in dialogue, and really try to seek understanding when addressing this resistance. Collaboration is a strength, so collaborate with the DEI community to share insights, strategies, and resources in the face of this opposition, but maintain the integrity of the work that we do in terms of the core values while adapting strategies to changing dynamics.
Well,
that is my presentation. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Well, it's always a pleasure to have Effenus Henderson. I can't underscore enough about him being the lead convener from the U.S. for the ISO. Here is a project that convened 167 countries over a decade, over 2,000 professionals, and here as one of our co-founders is the leader. And so some of the things that he is saying that give context to our work really underscore what we believe, which is you need to be in the DIP community because it will always be this knowledge transfer, there'll be the exchange, and we exemplify diversity. Here is somebody, our team looks very diverse, and we benefit from the thing that we're asking you to sell. So a lot of questions were coming to me. We're going to make sure that they get answered. What we're going to do is give you guys a break. So stay close, grab a cup of coffee, and in about 5 minutes, we'll be back with our next panel of DIP certification programs from around the globe.